Have you ever dreamed of going out on your own, starting a business, or taking your passion project to the next level? If so, you've probably heard or read about the importance of branding. And that's where today's Expert Academy interview leads us to a branding expert, marketing consultant, and professional speaker, Dorie Clark. Dorie is a best-selling author and reinvention expert. She's worked with Google, Microsoft, and the World Bank, just to name a few. So if you've ever wondered what it takes to brand, market, and launch a successful business, then sit back and get prepared to learn and dive into some awesome tips and tricks with the one and only Dorie Clark. Hello everyone, today I am extremely excited to welcome Dorie Clark to the show. She is an adjunct professor at Duke University's Fuqua School of Business and the author of Entrepreneurial You, Reinventing You, and Stand Out, which was voted the #1 leadership book of 2015 by Inc. magazine. As a former presidential campaign spokeswoman, the New York Times described her as an expert at self-reinvention and helping others to make changes in their lives. She's a frequent contributor to Harvard Business Review. She writes some incredible articles that I have loved to read over the years. And she consults and speaks with clients such as Google, Microsoft, and World Bank, just to name a few. And we're extremely glad that she's taking time out of her very busy schedule to be with us here today. So welcome to the show, Dorie.
Hey, Brandon. I'm glad to be talking with you.
How are you? Now, in your own words, if you don't mind, could you tell me a little bit about maybe who you are and what you do?
Sure, absolutely. I write business books, of course. My most recent one is called Entrepreneurial You. But most of the work that I do is around helping professionals learn to brand themselves successfully. So meaning, how do you reinvent yourself into the job or the career that you want? How do you make sure that people understand your true talents and capabilities so that they can really grasp the potential that you have and what you can offer? And how do you build a thriving career, a lucrative career from doing that, and hopefully begin to tap into more passive income and create multiple income streams? Those are the things that I write and speak and do coaching around.
Awesome. Now, I've got a couple questions in terms of that we'll get to in a little bit, but I want to start with you and the transition. And doing some research, you started with an early collegiate career and then into politics and journaling. And what really made the change from being on the presidential campaign and spokesperson into the marketing and consulting realm?
Well, the reason that I stopped being in politics essentially was that my candidates kept losing. So that was a pretty good reason to stop, right? I certainly would have followed them into government if the voters had decided that was a good idea, but alas, it didn't work that way. So after I worked on a governor's race, then I worked on a presidential race as a spokesperson. So after that, I became a nonprofit executive director, and I did that for a couple of years. But during the process of running this nonprofit, I kind of got hit with this revelation, this kind of unexpected revelation, which, now when you say it, it's kind of like, duh, but at the time it was like, wait, I had never thought about it, which is that running a nonprofit is basically exactly the same thing as running a business. You have to accomplish the same things. It's not like, even though it's a nonprofit, it's not like you can be losing money. And so I realized, this is essentially training me to run my own business. And so why don't I run my own business? So I spent the last year of my tenure running the nonprofit, essentially trying to train myself, taking adult ed classes and checking a million books out of the library and things like that, so that I could try to learn how to be an entrepreneur. And then I launched my business in 2006.
Incredible. Now, once you started building your business, I know a lot of people think, you can go out on your own and start a business and your success overnight. But I think, what are some of the biggest challenges that you would say that you overcame when starting?
Well, one of the most important things that any new entrepreneur faces is, there's the term of art for it, which is called product market fit. And essentially what that means is basically, do people want what you're selling? That's the most important question. And unfortunately, we almost never guess right the first time. You could have a really good theory, but odds are it's going to require some tweaks. Now, obviously there are some ideas that are just like bad ideas, but the majority of ideas, you actually can't really tell if they're good or bad. Like, they could kind of go either way. And the only way that you can really tell is by experimenting. And so early on, I think the big challenge for a nascent entrepreneur is trying to get that product market fit and to understand exactly what will resonate with people. And so for me, I had a number of iterations early in my business within the first few years. So first of all, I originally started my business and I thought that it was going to be a business doing political consulting. I worked in politics, and so I thought, oh, I can just do that, which, it's not a bad theory. That could have been successful, but it turned out that the first clients that I got, they weren't political candidates. Like I was having a hard time getting political candidate clients. Instead, it was a lot of nonprofits and government agencies that wanted to hire me. And so, I was fortunately not stupid, at least in that regard. And I'm like, oh, you want to give me money? Okay, I guess I'm not a political consultant. I guess I'm a communications consultant. So I started doing that. And then another change that I had to make was early on, I was doing a lot of basically PR consulting. That was kind of my, it was what I knew how to do from my time running press on campaigns. But I discovered pretty quickly a fairly thankless task to be doing this in the mid 2000s, because it was at the time of a lot of media cutbacks. And so newspapers they were like hemorrhaging staff, and they were very dramatically, within a period of years, just slicing down their size, the number of pages they had to fill. And so clients still had in their head from like 3 years ago, 5 years ago, like, oh, this should be a front page story. And it's like, no, it's not going to be a front page story anymore, because there are no reporters left to write this. And so they wouldn't get the front page coverage, and they would blame me for that. And I just was like, wow, this sucks. Who wants a job where you're constantly getting blamed, even though you're like working as hard as you possibly can? And no matter how hard you're like, oh, the situation's changing, they just think you're like lying to them. So I was like, all right, I'm not going to do PR consulting anymore. So that was kind of how I switched into marketing consulting. So, it's an evolution.
That's it. You've got to be able to pivot and let the market tell you what it wants, so that you can adapt and change and use your skill set. And like you said, thankfully, you're intelligent and adapted to that to move forward.
Yeah, thank you.
Now, in terms of networking, I know you've written quite a few articles and a lot about how that network, getting an in and creating that circle of influence. How did that play into your position? And then also for someone who may be starting something, where should someone start? Networking has this weird taboo about it. But could you expand on that a little bit for us?
Yeah. Well, if you're getting started in your business, one of the first things you discover is that almost all of your early clients are people you already know, which, in some ways it might seem kind of weird. Like when you hear about like business marketing, you think, oh, I'm going to get clients because of this ad or this billboard or this email campaign. And it's like, no, you're going to get clients because you know these people already, because those are the ones that have enough trust and confidence in you to give you a chance, even when you don't have a ton of experience. So I think that understanding that early on is useful. And I think that ultimately, if we're talking about getting clients and lead generation and things like that, there's kind of a formula that I've developed that I think is useful to think about, and that's thinking about sales and marketing as a continuum, right? Certainly they're complementary activities, but they're slightly different, because sales is about getting business in the short term. It's like, what can you do today that's going to get you business like today or tomorrow? Marketing is much more long-range focused, and it's not going to get you a client today. It might get you a client in a year, might get you a client in 2 years. Now the trick is, you might say, oh, well, why would you even bother with that? Like, what's the point of that? But marketing, when it's done right, marketing is actually a lot more effective than sales, because it brings people to you. And when you have the power dynamic in your favor, when people are coming to you, then you are in a position of strength. So marketing is more effective, but it doesn't show results for a long time. So early on, you've got to do a lot more sales, because you've just got to get business in the door, but you always have to do a little bit of marketing at least, so that you can plant the seeds for the long term, so that eventually those people can come to you, and over time you can do a lot more marketing and a lot less sales.
Right. It's like pushing that snowball up a hill, and then after so long that you've been investing in it, it flips and and that's when it starts coming back to you, that those marketing efforts start to pay off.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, like you said at the beginning, in terms of personal branding and building out a brand, I think that's such a huge part of today's economy, because you may have a very qualified resume, you may have lots of experience, but if you don't know how to package and put that together in a way that an employer or a client realizes that selling proposition, it's a big change. So when it comes to personal branding, how have things changed in a digital sense, because of, versus it just used to be who you knew and going around and meeting people face to face. And now with the emergence of all the social networks and blogging, it's really changed quite a bit.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, on one hand, it's created a little bit of like, you could call it a psychological burden for some people, because they're like, oh my God, it's like one more thing I have to think about. It's one more thing I have to manage. But of course, there's an upside to it as well, which is that before, it was a little hard to kind of manage your reputation if you're only talking about people who know you personally, because they just have this very, deeply entrenched sense of who you are. They've been interacting with you every day for the last 3 years. If you want to be something different all of a sudden, they're like, come on, Brandon, no, you're not, Right. Whereas online, you have a huge ability to shape people's perceptions of you, because how is it shaped? Well, it's shaped based on what you say about yourself on platforms like LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook or things like that. It's also based on what you write about, what you share. So if you decide, suddenly we're inventing a new career for you, Brandon, but we say, okay, Brandon is going to be a fashion photographer. That is his new career, right? Well, how do you show people that you're legitimate as a fashion photographer? Well, you get an Instagram account, and every day you start uploading new photos that you've taken. Before long, if people start checking you out, they're like, oh, well, this guy's taken thousands of photos and they look pretty good. I guess he's a fashion photographer. And so it enables you to have a lot more agency in shaping and in reshaping how people think of you.
I agree. And now, what would you say in terms of, building that brand versus formal credentials, and how do you overcome some of those boundaries if maybe you didn't go to business school or you don't have a PhD, but you are qualified as, a sales or management consultant?
Yeah, well, I think, you're coming to the right place, Brandon, because I do not have an MBA and I do not have a PhD. So I think that there's a huge amount of room for reasonably intelligent people to be able to create a brand such that they have the credentials and the credibility to do the thing that they want to do. Credentials, I think in a lot of ways, sometimes people just limit themselves with regard to credentials. Like, is it nice if you have an MBA? Is it nice if you have a PhD? Sure, absolutely. That's great. It's, we're not saying it's a bad credential to have. It's a great credential to have. But do you absolutely have to have it? No, you definitely don't. And I think there's a lot of people who limit themselves because they say, oh, I don't have that, therefore I could never do X, Y, Z. It's like, no, come on. There's other ways around it. The question you have to ask is not like, how could I get a PhD? The question you have to ask is, how can I demonstrate credibility? And there's many, many routes to that. Maybe it is writing for high-profile publications. Maybe it's publishing a book. Maybe it is starting a very popular podcast or web series. Maybe it is consulting for high-profile clients that people have heard of. Maybe it is getting yourself to be a source on television or something for the media so that people recognize you in that way. Maybe it is becoming the head of a professional association. All of these are potential routes and potential sources of so-called social proof, which is a concept that I talk a lot about in my online course, Recognized Expert. It's kind of a cornerstone. If you want to be recognized as a thought leader in your field, as an expert in your field, social proof or credibility is one of the things that you really need to think consciously about how to amass and how to attach to yourself.
I 100% agree. And I think in a lot of ways that social proof can trump formal credentials if you've been working or building and you have that experience, especially with someone like yourself. Now, for example, in terms of, building that, your personal branding, when it comes to learning these new skill sets and investing, I think people don't realize that there's so much out there outside of, formal education that they can learn. And you write about that quite a bit, and investing in yourself and investing in those skills. So what would you say are the top 2 or 3 skills for success in today's world?
Well, I'm certainly a believer in being able to communicate effectively. I mean, that is important. It's always been important, but now we actually have even more opportunities for that. Because people have podcasts, or because people are doing webinars all the time. It used to be that if you were going to speak to 100 people, you actually had to be pretty prominent already, because otherwise who's going to let you speak to 100 people? Now you could say, hey guys, I'm having a webinar, and you put that up on Facebook, and it's hey, you could be speaking to 100 people. So I think public speaking is a hugely important skill to become proficient at. Similarly, I am, just talk about the basics. I'm a big fan of being able to write well. Not that everybody has to do that necessarily. I mean, you think about somebody like a Gary Vaynerchuk, who's become very well known in the marketing space. He originally thought in the early days about starting a blog, and then he's no, I don't like to write. I'm not a good writer. And so he started a video blog instead, and that was really what prompted him to become a household name. Now he's written multiple books, but note, he dictated the books, which it's a doable thing. But this being said, I think it is a huge advantage to be able to write well, write easily, write quickly, etc. Mm-hmm. So that content. We talk about the 3 stools of becoming a recognized expert: social proof, content creation in whatever form, and then of course your network. Those are the 3 levers that you really have to drive. And if we're thinking about other skills and things that we need to know, I think if you mix the ability to read well, to write well, the ability to speak well, and then you have subject matter expertise, whatever that looks like, whatever your thing is, whether it's graphic design or marketing or tennis, whatever it is. If you have some depth of something to say, and then you merge that with the ability to say it well, then it's oh man, unstoppable.
Gotcha. Now, you've mentioned public speaking, and as you've grown your consulting and marketing business, when did the public speaking factor come into play? Your TED Talks are incredible. I've watched them multiple times. And were you always a great public speaker, or how did that kind of evolve into your wheelhouse?
Well, from the beginning of me launching my business in 2006, I definitely had speaking as a component of it. At the time, and I think this is the case for a lot of people in the early stages of their business, I wasn't getting paid for it at all. It was a marketing function that, hey, it's like a chamber of commerce, blah, blah, blah. And so you speak and you do a workshop or something, and maybe you get some clients out of it. So it's a useful form of practice, and it can be valuable to you if in fact you've chosen your audience wisely and you are really in front of potential clients. But even before that, I did have experience in various facets of public speaking, because of course I had been doing press for political campaigns, so I was often serving as a spokesperson for that. So I had to get comfortable with it. All that's to say, I feel like I continue to improve as a speaker. I think about, or I look at footage of myself, a couple of years ago, 5 years ago, and, I wasn't as good as I am now because I have that much more practice. I can actually look back and see oh yeah, I would do that differently today. I think I was okay. I think I was reasonably good, but I do see improvement and think I'm better today. And, fortunately, as both my skill level has increased and you could say my brand has increased, because I've now, written 3 books and have spent that much more time being able to talk about them publicly. I've been able to go from being a free speaker to being a paid keynote speaker, which has been nice and has been able to be a big part of my, my income streams.
Now, of your keynote speeches, is there one that is your favorite to give?
I have fun with all of them. None of my speeches is, I never literally give the same one twice. I always shake it up a little bit in some way because I talk to the client beforehand to figure out who the audience is and what's going to be most of interest and most relevant to them. But I would say probably the speech that I end up giving the most commonly is called Building Your Brand as a Leader. And it's kind of a hybrid of some of the work that I did for my first two books, Reinventing You and Stand Out. And it's basically, for folks inside organizations, what can they do to get their true talents recognized by other people so they can make their biggest contribution.
Awesome. Now, on the personal side, as you've been building and growing your business, have you had any mentors or coaches that have really helped you a lot along the way?
Well, I don't necessarily have like a traditional mentor per se of this one person. But there have certainly been communities that have been very valuable to me that people have put together. And, in different ways they've been helpful. I am, very grateful to people who have organized things. Even online communities can be extremely useful in terms of building a community and having a good information exchange. So for instance, I have a friend named Mike McAllowitz who created something that ran for about a year and a half called the Speakers Exchange, which was a kind of a referral group, you could say, of professional speakers that he got together. And that was a really lovely community. Similarly, there's a guy named Scott Stratton, who's a professional speaker that runs a Facebook group for the speaking community. And that's become a really nice source of information and support.
Gotcha. Yeah, those support networks and support groups are so crucial, especially as an entrepreneur. Sometimes you can feel like you're the only person in the world, and you need others in that same camp to keep you motivated. I think that's such a crucial aspect of success.
Absolutely.
Now, I know on your website you recommend a few books: Never Eat Alone, Influence, Power, a couple others. But do you have, and then outside of your own, obviously, Entrepreneurial You is incredible. Recently finished that one. Now, do you have any other books or new recommendations that you would add to that list?
Oh, man. If we're talking about business books specifically, as it happens, Brandon, I keep a list in my telephone of books that I have read recently. So, I do. I have some recommendations of ones that I have read recently. So one that I really liked was called The Four by Scott Galloway. And it is kind of his analysis of sort of the four big digital, sort of tech players. So Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and the other one was Microsoft. Oh, it was Google. Yeah, thank you. So that's right, 4. So anyway, that was super interesting for anyone who's interested in kind of the future of tech and therefore society. Another one that was really good, it has not come out yet, but it's going to be released very soon. It's called Nimble by a guy named Prasad. That's a kind of cool book about business agility. And I'll give you one more. I read Barking Up the Wrong Tree by Eric Barker, which is kind of a sort of Malcolm Gladwell-ish look at success and motivation and things like that. And that was a really good read.
Awesome. Now, for 2018, as we're kicking things off here, do you have any big projects that you're working on?
One that I'm working on right now, I'm actually just sort of shifting from the getting it together phase to the operating it phase. This is the first year that I've actually been doing mastermind groups, paid masterminds that I run. And so that's been a really interesting process to pull that together. It was over the past couple of years I've experimented with doing day-long live events with readers and people who are participants in my online courses. And so I did one in 2016, one in 2017. And a number of people said to me, hey, we'd like this to be an ongoing group. Would you run something like that? So I decided to just try and see if there was interest. And, it's been an interesting question to figure out how do you structure it? How do you pull it together in a way that's going to be interesting and meaningful for people? But so I'm actually running 2 groups now, 2 distinct groups. One is for people who are new entrepreneurs, which I call the Scaling to 6 Figures Mastermind. And then one is for people who are more experienced entrepreneurs. They're already at 6 figures and they want to just keep getting bigger and better. And that's called the Trajectory Mastermind. So we've got the rosters set and we're getting ready to launch that imminently.
That's exciting. I was a part of a mastermind for most of 2016 and some of 17. And I can say, from personal experience, surrounding yourself in that type of environment with the right people can do amazing things for your business. So I'm excited that you're launching one. I wish you all the success in the world in that.
Thank you.
So a couple wrap-up questions to get to know you a little bit. If you could have a conversation with anyone, past, present, future, fact or fiction, who would it be?
Oh my gosh. If I could have a conversation with anyone, I would say, I gave a speech, or not really a speech. I was on a panel discussion about 3 weeks ago, which was interesting. It's not something that I do much anymore of. It was a panel discussion about philosophy, and I was a philosophy major as an undergrad, and I got invited to be part of this panel discussion about philosophy and New Year's resolutions. And so as a result of that, I started rereading Plato, and it was really fun and really interesting. And so, if I could pick anybody, I think right now I would probably pick Socrates, because it's like, why not, man? That guy had it figured out. He had a theory of the universe
A long time ago. He had
yeah. So I think that would be pretty cool.
That would be a pretty incredible conversation. Now, I know that you are an inspiration to many. Lots of people look to your leadership, your articles, your books are absolutely incredible. But who is an inspiration to you?
There's an article. I mean, there's lots of people in general, but I'll pick someone who literally just today I was like, wow, this is really great. I was reading an article about the woman who was a gymnast, and she was the first person to go public with talking about being molested by Larry Nassar, the Michigan State coach, and he was the person who was the official doctor for the women's Olympic gymnastics team. He apparently molested 160 people. It's like, my God, how do you even have time for that? I mean, Jesus. But anyway, it's so all these people have subsequently come out, but it's always the hardest to be the first one. And it was a profile of this woman who decided that she would be the first one to publicly attach her name to it. And I think that's a real profile and courage to do that, and to give everybody else down the line space to be able to speak up. So I think anybody who's willing to be the first in doing something or talking about something is a very powerful role.
I definitely agree. And I like how, you're inspired by a person, but it's almost the inspiration of that idea of that, strength to come out and speak up against injustice in that way.
Yeah, totally.
So good answer for that one. Now, how can some of our viewers, if they want to, start in the Dorie Clark bibliography and all of your courses and everything, where should someone start, and how can they learn some more about you?
Yeah, thank you, Brandon. I appreciate it. Well, a good starting place always is my website. I have more than 400 free articles that I've written for places like the Harvard Business Review and Entrepreneur and Forbes available on the site. It's just DorieClark.com, DorieClark.com. And I also, for people who are specifically interested in entrepreneurship and developing multiple income streams, I have a free resource that is adapted from my book, Entrepreneurial You. It is the 88-question Entrepreneurial You self-assessment. And so it's a series of questions that kind of walks you through how to apply the ideas in Entrepreneurial You to your own business. And folks can get that for free at DorieClark.com/entrepreneur.
Awesome. I will definitely be looking that up. 88-question assessment. That's going to ask some good insight out of you, I have a feeling.
Yeah, we make you work for it.
Wonderful. Now, final question here. Is there anything that you wish I had asked, or do you have any final words of wisdom?
Oh my goodness, thank you. Well, I think you were very thorough and complete, so no complaints whatsoever on the omissions front. And I will just say that I am delighted to have the chance to talk about this, because for me, part of what animates me when it comes to ideas about entrepreneurship, and especially around personal branding and entrepreneurship, is that everybody who's listening has probably, seen, they know people who are smart, who are talented, who have good ideas, and yet in a lot of ways those ideas may not be getting out there. They may not being heard because things are so noisy and so competitive now. And it frankly is just a different skill set, being good at something versus being known for being good at something. And you have to crack that code. You have to figure out, okay, how do I get the idea out there? How do I get known for this? Because otherwise, you and your mom and 3 people are going to know about it, and the idea goes away. So I'm really committed to helping people unlock the how of it, to unlock what the sort of hidden mechanisms are by which people can become recognized experts and have their ideas really be heard, so that the best ideas can hopefully get out there and rise to the top.
I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head with that, because like you said, there's so many people who have wonderful ideas, they're inspirations, they've got a whole career's worth of advice and knowledge, and they simply don't know. There's so many tools, there's so many ways to get it out into the world, but if they don't have that skill set, that toolbook that you can help them with to get it out there, then like you said, the ideas go by the wayside. So, people like you help people like us to get our word and our message out to the world, and you're an inspiration to many. So it's a pleasure to have you here, and thank you so much. I took 2.5 pages of notes here, and I'm sure once I go through the interview to make some more, I'll have even more. But once again, Dorie, thank you so much for being here with us.
Hey, thanks a lot, Brandon. Great to talk to you.
And that's a wrap. What'd you think? Let me know the favorite thing that you learned in the comment section below. And if you know someone who is starting a business, working on their brand, go ahead and share this interview with them. I'm sure that they've got lots of tips and tricks that they can learn from. And below, I've included links to Dorie's website, her books, her programs, her coaching. So if there's something that we talked about and you want to dive in, learn a bit more about that, everything is in the description box below. I've made it super easy for you. As always, click subscribe right down there in the corner so you never miss a video. New expert interviews every single Wednesday. So top tips right from the pros themselves. We've got Sam on Monday with life lessons from TV shows, and Friday we're breaking down different personality types. So something for everyone. Finally, check us out on the web, lifesecretsauce.com. You can check us out, see what we're up to, the newest blog posts, and then sign up for our newsletter so that we can bring the awesome straight to your inbox. Until next time, ciao for now.